you take all these large fleets that have been requiring speed limiting devices for years. You know, Jami and I spent a day.
Newsflash, they still get speeding tickets.
Landline now, welcome back. We are into the month of March, and that means it's time to talk about a new issue of Landline magazine. Managing editor Jami Jones and senior editor Mark Schremmer join me now. Thank you both for coming in.
Hey, you're welcome, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Jami, I want to start with you and your editor's desk page. You reflected back on your basketball days in this one, which I assume a few years ago, but not
Just
too
a
many.
few.
Talk to me about that. I always look forward to these articles and your analogies.
Well, this one was kind of funny because I don't know why it just hit me out of the blue. Maybe it's a little bit of March Madness coming up or whatever. But the headline on it is The Wise Words of Eric Hansen. And this was actually a guy who played basketball at the same high school I did. And it was really funny because the school had this policy that if you played girls basketball, you had to be on the track team. I hate track. I mean, if it doesn't involve a basketball, I'm not running, jumping, doing anything. No, this was not going to happen. So how hard is it to not make a track team? I mean, come in dead last, flop on all the jumping, and so I was terrible at track, intentionally so. Well, their only option for me to have an activity was to stick me in with the senior high boys off-season basketball, and here I was, a ninth grade girl. And they did not take it easy on me. They weren't particularly mean or rough or anything, but there was no dumbing down the drills. If I was supposed to jump and act like I was touching the rim like they were, that wasn't happening. But anyway, but we would scrimmage every day after practice was over. And, of course, in guys basketball, it was shirts and skins, so they always stuck me on skins. And, yes, I kept my shirt on, but I was always on skins. And Eric was the point guard on the other team, and he was dribbling up the floor and tried to juke me, and I stole the ball from him and went and had a layup. And it was like, this is so cool, and I finally got some credibility with these guys. Well, he pulled me to the side, and he was like, when you're playing point guard, you have to know where everybody on the floor is. Count the other team's jerseys. If you only see 3, there's 2 out there, and if you have the ball, they're coming after you. And it was like, that has kind of guided me through life, especially in this advocacy world that we live in, that you always have to know who your opponents are, where they're coming from, where your attack points are. All of that is so important. And when we were putting this issue together, the cover head on it is Battle Mode, which I love. We just really kind of approached it really different and did a big deep dive into all these different advocacy things. And we were name checking who the people were on the other side of the issue. And I think that that's something that's really important. It's not just where OOIDA or truckers are on the issue. We have to know the nexus of the opposition and where they are coming from.
Now, does Eric, was it?
Eric Hansen.
Does he know that his name, he got name dropped?
No, he
and
does not.
This good advice is carrying on?
Oh, well, yeah, we've actually talked about it before because he actually lives in the KC metro area as well. And so we reconnected a few years ago, and I was laughing and told him about it. He denies the fact that I stole the ball from him. He swears there was another Eric on the team that I stole it from, but I promise you it was Eric Hansen.
All right. Mark, now you did an article on speed limiters titled, "Is Slower Automatically Safer?" Tell me more about that.
Yeah, and to Jami's point, this issue, we're looking at so many of these different issues that truckers are against right now, and there's probably isn't one that's getting more attention than speed limiters.
Oh, clearly.
And, this May, FMCSA is expected to put out a notice of proposed rulemaking for a formal proposal on speed limiters, tell us what the top speed is. But what my article kind of focuses on is, so many times the agency, I think, overcomplicates issues. You take like hours of service, you put in these 30-minute mandatory breaks that they had at one time and doing that. And really, simply, all you needed to do is make sure that drivers have the ability when they're tired to be able to stop.
And that there's limits on it, you know, and that's it. I mean,
but they would, you jump through all these hoops and make it more complicated. In this instance, I think with speed limiters, they're really oversimplifying the problem and just saying slower, safer, and not thinking about any of the other variables that come into place. When they first put out the idea of going to speed limiters, one of the things they cited was just the number of crashes that are in like 70-mile-an-hour zones. But I went and asked the agency, okay, well, how fast were the trucks going, in these? How many of these trucks already were speed limited? Maybe the truck was only going 65 because it was speed limited to that, but it was still in a crash, and the cars were going 75 or 80 miles an hour. But they didn't know any of this information. But because of this, we're just using this one number as one stat, and we're going to say we need to, lower the speeds for all trucks. And so we just kind of break it down and go through all of the things. We show that, that it hasn't stopped speeding. You take all these large fleets that have been requiring speed limiting devices for years. Jami and I spent
Newsflash, they still get speeding tickets.
we spent a day looking through it, and the number of speeding tickets that they get is quite staggering, actually.
Yeah, for speed limited trucks. And when you start looking at and breaking down the data like that, that's a big eye opener. And so Mark did that deep dive, and we broadened the approach on speed limiters this time and tapped in our state legislative editor, Keith Goebel, because this really is turning into part of the fight on this is a states' rights issue. Yeah. States know what stretches of highway can have, higher speed limits, which ones can't. They have that data. They know what's happening in these areas. So that's where the states have the ability to set these speed limits. So we have a companion piece that, goes along with the speed limiter of all the states that are looking at, and in a lot of cases, removing split speed limits because they're dangerous.
Oh, wow.
And so it was more of a holistic approach to the speed issue, if you will, and how it affects not only safety on the roads, but it takes states' rights away and frankly puts drivers in a very bad position.
Where are we with FMCSA's speed limiter proposal?
Well, if kind of go back, it's been delayed several times that we have a formal proposal, but the latest it's projected to come out in May. And like I said, at that point in time, we are expected to have a top speed, and that's been a big question. They've floated around things as slow as 60 miles an hour, and as fast as like 68 miles an hour. So at that point, OIDA and most truckers are against a mandate at any of those speeds, but obviously, if you try to set it at 60 when we have so many highways out there with 75 mile an hour speed limits or even 80 miles an hour, it doesn't take long to figure out why that would be problematic.
Yeah.
So that's what the agency has planned. But remember, in Congress, we have the DRIVE Act, which it would actually stop any mandatory speed limiters. And so that's where you need to, shameless plug, go over to fightingfortruckers.com,
100%. Get
your lawmakers to sign on. Because if Congress tells them, no, you can't do this, that will be the end of this. I would really be shocked if they ever rise that one rises from the dead again if Congress ends it.
Now, this comes as likely no surprise to anyone listening, but there's, of course, a push for electric trucks. Jami, you talked about this and the significant hurdles that are being faced. Talk to me more about that.
Well, and the thing is, everything is under the guise of zero emission. And before anybody gets all ramped up over zero emission, this article actually goes into that a little bit, that it's zero direct emission. It's what comes out of the tailpipe. Clearly, through the manufacturing process, there is, your cradle to, cradle to grave.
There's really no such thing as zero emissions.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that has to be factored into this conversation. And I just think it's really important so we did that. We looked at the shortcomings for not only the infrastructure to get these things charged. If you can get them charged, you probably only have a 400-mile top, radius. So that leaves long haul pretty much out, for the most part. And then you have to talk about how many more electric trucks will need to be on the road So there you have more emissions through the manufacturing process. That's more trucks on the road taking up more parking that's already being absorbed by the infrastructure for the charging stations. So there's just a lot to it. Now, I mean, electric definitely has its place in the world. It can be vocational, it can be local, it can be buses. That's not to say electric doesn't have a place in the grand scheme. But when they keep trying to say trucking can lead the way, no, long haul can't. And then the last part for me is just the sticker shock. I mean, you're talking $425,000 for an electric truck. That's insane.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not something that the common small business carrier is going to want to invest in or be able to for the most part.
Now, Mark, you wrote about another hot button issue we've talked a lot about, and that is automatic emergency brakes. The final rules on that are expected to come out soon. When is that expected, and kind of where are we with that?
Well, I think April is the projected date on that. But again, with all of these, never be surprised for government to move slower.
Right.
on
it
this
is
sort
an
of thing.
election year, too, so all bets are off on what will and won't make the cut.
Yeah, and I think going on with the electric trucks, kind of the same deal. It's definitely, the cart before the horse is the same thing on this automatic emergency brakes. We've heard over and over from drivers about all of the problems and the defects, false activations that these have. And one of the things that was really concerning to me at a hearing a couple of months ago, Ann Carlson, who was the acting administrator at the time of NHTSA, was saying, we have these problems now, but by the time that this were to go into effect, we think the problems would be solved. But that's not, you don't create a mandate around hoping that things are going to be working in 3 years.
Right.
If this works, and I mean, I've talked to drivers that are adamantly against this, and they're like, if this worked the way they say that it would work, they would sign up in a second.
Yeah.
They obviously they don't want to be involved in a crash. If this device and equipment was going to make sure that they were going to avoid crashes on the road when passenger vehicles are doing dangerous things every time, of course they would sign up for it. But they don't feel safe. In this, often you get these false brakes if it's bad weather, ice on the roads, or, just not feeling control of the vehicle.
Well, and the thing is, and what government and regulators fails to understand, and we've been down this road before with the reduced emission standards starting back in October of 2002. You cannot wave a magic wand and expect manufacturers to just create technology that meets these standards.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen, not in a perfect world, not in an imperfect world. It doesn't happen. And trucking had problems in October 2002, 2004, 2007. I mean, these engines were junk. And it wasn't the engine manufacturer's fault either. It was an overly aggressive approach at mandating regulations. And that's what we're seeing again. And they've got to learn from the past.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if these things work and they're cost effective, you don't need a mandate because these businesses will sign up for
The market will adopt it, yes.
Yeah.
Now, one last thing I wanted to ask. This is a bi-monthly issue. How is the process of putting this together different from the other monthly issues?
We have a bigger crystal ball.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, we just have to project out further and everything. And I know we're running short on time, but I did want to just do another shameless plug. Our subscriptions are free to anyone affiliated with the trucking industry. You can get a print or a digital or both. So just visit landline.media. We will have our digital version live tomorrow. So be sure and check it out.
All right, Jami, Mark, thank you so much.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Jami Jones and Mark Schremmer of Landline Magazine. You can check out landline.media for all the latest in the trucking industry. And if you have a news tip, you can contact us through our website or call 816-229-5791. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. We'll be back after this.